Welcome to the Produce on Purpose podcast, where we experience life being the real you. I'm your host, Randy Atkins Jr., author, teacher, speaker, preacher, and lifelong learner. I am excited about our guest today. We have Dr. Dean Sunseri and HollyKem Sunseri, co-authors of A Roadmap to the Soul, a practical guide to love, compassion, and inner peace. A seasoned experts in guiding individuals, couples, and families toward healing and purpose. They've been married since 1991, and their dynamic partnership blends over 3 decades of experience in helping people overcome past trauma, break free from self-destructive patterns, and discover a deeper, more meaningful life. Dean and HollyKem, how are you today? And welcome to the Produce on Purpose podcast.
Thank you. Doing good. Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yes.
Hey, Dean and Holly, can you share a pivotal moment in your life where forgiveness reshaped your perspective on relationships and how to move forward with purpose?
Wow, that's a good question.
A good question.
Go ahead, honey.
Okay. Well, I would have to say the first person I had to forgive in my life was myself. And because I'm a recovering drug addict and alcoholic, and I've been sober for 42 years, there was
congrats.
Oh, thank you. There was a lot to forgive. And in that, what helped me with understanding that was that in the sense that because it wasn't really who I was and who God intended me to be, helped me forgive where I went.
Okay.
Because the truth was, I was way more than all of that. But I did have to rectify all that I did. I had to take responsibility and accountability. So in the forgiveness process, because I could see in my heart who God intended me to be was not what I was showing to the outside because I was protecting myself, made it easier in the process that I needed to forgive myself.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, I would add to that. There was a real pivotal moment. I was in the Catholic seminary at a monastery, and we had to have a spiritual director, one of the monks. And I had this monk, Father Bill. And, Catholics have this Lenten thing where from Ash Wednesday to Good Friday, it's kind of a preparation for the Lord's resurrection kind of thing. But I met with him on Ash Wednesday, and he said, I have a project for you, and it's about a 40-day project. He said, you need to do an inventory of your heart.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I've learned is that, Jesus taught in the parable of the sower, he said, though they have eyes, they don't see, though they have ears, they do not hear. Why? Because their heart has grown hardened. That our inability to see and hear spiritually has nothing to do with our eyes and ears. It has everything to do with the condition of our heart.
Yes.
And then later in the Beatitudes, he said, blessed are the what? The pure in heart, for they shall see God. So we regain our sight by purifying our heart.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so I got a hold of that. And so what he did is he said, I want you over the next 40 days, write down any resentments that you have in life about past experiences, past relationships, experiences with your father, experiences with your mother, girlfriends in high school, friends, this, that. And I did that exhaustive list, and it was what happened, how I felt, what happened, how I felt. And as a typical man, there was a lot of experiences that I had that were difficult for me, but I just internalized all the emotion connected to it. I mean, I just didn't you're a man, you don't talk about this. And so I wrote that all down, and on Good Friday, I met with Father Bill, and he said, read me the list.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went through each experience that I had been reflecting on, and he said, all those hurts that you're carrying in your heart, we're going to offer on the altar right now and ask the Lord to remove it. And so that was my understanding of what forgiveness is. I'm recognizing I've been hurt by life, hurt by people. I'm acknowledging the truth of it. I'm laying it down on the altar and I'm asking the Lord to remove that. And I can remember that was one of the most powerful experiences and days in my life. I just felt so light. There was just a release and a lifting and a purifying of my heart. And it's like I just wanted to run. I wanted to do something. I didn't know what to, and it was one of the day that really marked me in terms of the power of forgiveness, that it allowed me to be in the present, not still reacting from past hurts that I have experienced in the years before that.
Yeah, that's interesting because I also thought of the scripture in Proverbs 4:23 where it talks about, we're to guard our heart, and because out of it flows the issues of life. And as you were talking about that, I do believe our heart is a very key component to how we should live. And HollyKem, you said something that really I wanted to see if we could talk a little bit about. You said that you were protecting yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what you kind of found out. How did you kind of come to that conclusion that you were protecting yourselves? Because I think that's something that we all do.
Yeah.
And how did that kind of come about for you and that revelation that was there?
Sure. Well, one of the things is that God had showed me through the recovery journey. What was I recovering? Myself, right? That's what you want to. A lot of people don't know what they're recovering, but I'm recovering myself from being so lost. And what God showed me was that every time I got hurt in my life, it was like I put it. I was able to get some of it out, but what I wasn't able to get out or didn't feel safe about getting out, I put it in a bucket, right? And it was on this side of me. And when that bucket got too full and I didn't know how to handle that, I started to protect myself from not being hurt again. And that looked very different, when I was younger. I was trying to be a good girl, trying to be a good sister, a good daughter, make good grades, be a good neighbor, all those things, right? But as life was happening and things were hurting me, I didn't know those things weren't working. So for myself, I went from being socially acceptable protections, right? To being socially unacceptable protectors. So I started to protect myself with drugs and alcohol and, numbing all of that pain. So what started to happen was 80% of my life, I was living out of a protective shield instead of who I really was and who God intended me to be. And, through that process is how, we teach people what we do. Is that exact language. And you're exactly right. It's all of us do that. What happens is we can get really caught in that. And then that's what they call the mask that we put on, the thing, because we want to be liked. We want to be accepted. The pain is too great. All of the reasons that we do that. It's not because we're bad people. It's because we're hurting people. And this is our humanness trying to protect ourselves. So as I was, they talk about the onion, as I was peeling these things off, guess what else comes out is the wounds, the tears, right? And the pain and the memories. And it's how do you really love yourself through that? And that's what the forgiveness became, is that who I really am was not what happened to me. And who I really am is not how I portrayed myself and protected myself from the world. But who I am got very lost,
right?
Which is the sin for me. It's the big sin. It's to not be my true self and who God intended me to be on this earth, because he put me here for a purpose, to love.
Yeah. And I think that just goes into the same thing that Dean was just talking about of the forgiveness piece. And it sounds like, Dean, you must have had some type of release. And can you talk about a little bit about how that release and breaking free of that may have led you to also releasing maybe negative patterns that you may have had in your life?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're directly connected, because the image I have is that if I'm carrying 100 pounds of internalized emotional pain about life, my protection system is going to be 100 pounds strong.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. If events occur and it increases to 1,000, then my protection system's going to become 1,000 pounds strong. Mm-hmm. And so they're directly proportioned, but there was a tremendous release. And when that happened, then I was able to start letting go of some of the self-destructive behaviors. And, I sort of went, my protective behaviors were more on the good side. Mm-hmm. They were not, when I say good, that they appeared good, but they did not, but they still caused problems.
Right. It was socially acceptable.
So if my protection behavior was to isolate, not talk, withdraw from relationships, well, that can seem good because I'm pursuing study and prayer and so forth, which is all good stuff. But if it's at the detriment of relationships, then it's causing problems. So hers looked real different. Her protective system, okay, she's shooting dope. That looks pretty bad, but if I'm isolating in the seminary, it's a bit different. But
they don't put you in jail for what he was doing.
Right. And so it did. When I started to let go of some of the hurts about that, I started to learn to be more connected to people, and I started desiring more closer and intimate relationships. And frankly, I've always had a strong calling on my life, but if you grow up Catholic, you have that's priesthood. And I started to become disenchanted with that lifestyle because it was so isolating. I loved it because it was so isolating, but after doing some of the work, I didn't like it because it was so isolating and disconnected. And I started desiring more connection. So it did have a great impact. So it had an impact on two levels. One, I started to be able to act towards life instead of react towards life.
Yeah.
And then I started to be able to challenge some of the belief systems, that unhealthy belief systems that I had that were causing me to suffer and those to suffer around me, and then to start having a choice. So, no, I can have healthy, connected, intimate relationships with men and women. I can trust. I can learn to express my feelings. I can learn to have a voice. All those things started to have a choice to be able to do that once I started to let go of the weight of the emotional pain.
I love both of your stories because it's almost like we all have some of the same issues, and I always feel that sometimes it's worse when we have the ones that we think are socially acceptable that kind of get us to a particular place, because you're just kind of still walking around this world kind of numb and not conscious to really what's happening or what's going on in your life in order to start to address some of the things that are there, because you're just saying, well, I'm good because nobody's upset with me, or everybody, they like the way that I'm doing this. Yes. And so I think that it's very interesting and helpful for everyone to understand that you don't have to be on some part of this particular scale. It still has to be worked regardless of who you are, where you are, and what part of life you're in. What does living on purpose mean to each of you, and how do you align your daily lives with this philosophy?
You want me to go? Living on purpose is a good question, because so many of us will get into performance versus purpose. And that's where that protective system comes back in play. And for me, living on purpose is being in my skin, being who I am, and being connected to myself, to others, and to God. And if I am connected there, then anything that is in front of me is either to serve or be a friend or to love. It's like, I have to love to serve, and I have to love being served, right? And then I have to receive that. And then I also need to love in the give and take. So it's like, for me, what I've learned, what I've been able to do very, very well now is how to love. And for me, that is what Jesus was like. When everything that I see about Jesus, he's my total everything. He's my role model. He's everything. And what did he do the best? Was he loved well. Mm-hmm. And that was what, when I first got sober, all I wanted to do was not be in pain every day. That was all if I could just take the pain away, where I wasn't just excruciating emotional pain every day. And then from there, I wanted to be more like Jesus.
Yeah, and there's another dimension of that in the sense of, I believe we're all called to be on a healing journey.
Mm.
You know, Jesus loved to heal more than anything else, and that's part of our journey. But in our healing journey, there's also crumbs of our purpose. And what I mean by that is I really believe that our greatest hurts, our greatest difficulties are meant to become our greatest treasures.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, for example, I had, you know, at a time in my late teenagers, early 20s, my father's drinking had escalated to a level where it was really becoming a problem, destroying his marriage, destroying him, destroying our family. And he made a very courageous decision of going to treatment. Been sober ever since, and so it's 40 plus years, you know, so certainly love my dad for doing that. But at the time, it was difficult. And it was the most shameful thing in my life. There was the embarrassment of how that was impacting him, my relationship with him, the marriage, all that stuff. Well, there was a certain point where we started to heal as a family, and we went through a healing process. He went to treatment. There was a lot of things that were done. And all of a sudden, that very dark secret that was the most painful thing that I've experienced became one of my greatest treasures, because after going through the gauntlet of healing, I can't tell you how many times in the last 30, 35 years, how many families I've helped, how many couples I've helped, how many people I've helped to come out of that substance abuse cycle. And so all of a sudden, this greatest hurt has become one of my greatest treasures. And I think that that's part of my purpose. And for all of us, if we look in our histories, sometimes when we go through a healing process, then that's very much integrated in our purpose. And I love the name of your book is Produce on Purpose. And it's all about recovering who we are, going through the gauntlet of healing, letting go of the self-destructive behaviors. And it's in that process that we actually grab hold of some of the things that are part of our purpose.
Yeah, I agree with what you're talking about, because the idea that, you know, we go through this life, and a lot of times what we are trying to protect ourselves from is to not go through something.
Yes.
But what I've found on the other side of actually going through sometimes the loss of a loved one, sometimes it's through the pain or hurt of some type of traumatic experience, that what you find is that you have a greater appreciation on the other side of that healing.
That's
Saying that you get to the healing, sometimes people pull away instead of moving towards the healing. And our encouragement is of course, at any time, any place, any moment of your life, you can move towards that healing. And it's great to know your purpose. And I love how you said that, you know, that can become your treasure even in those difficult times that you go through. So how has understanding your purpose evolved throughout your relationship and your careers and who you are and during your personal journeys?
Yeah, I would say that in the beginning of, you know, in recovery, was my purpose was not to hurt myself anymore, you know, and that was the first thing I had to master, you know, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, to quit just beating myself to death, you know, and take the self-hatred out. And then from there, as that, you know, started to subside, I could not be so self-centered, you know, and then I could see there's another human being in front of me. But that's okay. You know, that's what it took. God, thank you. Look, thank you. Thank you. So, you know, because if you can't love yourself, you can't love anybody else. So I had to, you know, get past all of that. And then the next part of the purpose was to connect to other human beings. And, you know, through the fear, you know, and just really be available. And so my purpose went to that. And then the next part was, how am I going, you know, because then I got a divorce, and how am I going to, you know, live in this world? And, you know, what I used to do prior to sobriety was, you know, was in retail and fashion and all that. So now it was like, it didn't really fulfill me, you know? So it was like I started to work where I went to treatment, and then I God just really started to download the love for the people that were suffering. And I always think about Jesus, he's sitting at the right hand of the throne interceding for us with all of the compassion. Because why? He had everything that we were going to ever have, any wound we would ever have, right? Because we are healed by his stripes. So it's like, how can you go for a healing? He has it. So it's like the compassion, my purpose became to tap into that and to give it. And from there, as I've walked the journey, the purpose to be able to be who I really am in all areas, no matter if I'm on a podcast, in a session, at church, at the Walmart, with my husband, with my child, is to be me. That's my purpose, is to be clean and pure as I can be and be honest about the stuff that didn't work for me, in the moment or whatever. And that living my life, having a lifestyle of where I come from is my purpose, to show people, I'm a hope dealer now. I'm not a drug dealer. It's like, this is the real deal. Like, you can have it all. Whatever all
Beautiful.
is, you can have it.
Yeah, it's so good. I think also in general, I see the evolution of our purpose is that we go from takers to givers.
Yeah, that's good.
And when we're born, we need to take, and as we evolve. But that's interesting is that when we get wounded, it moves us from giver to taker. When we're stuck in our coping behaviors, we go from giver to taker. And so that's why we need to deal with those two aspects of ourselves, because we're all called to give. And that's when we're functioning at our highest level. And how to give? Well, it's in whatever creative abilities, our passions are. But what I have found is that there's greater and greater joy in giving. It's almost like if you compared it to money. I don't have any money, so I'm dependent on my parents. But there's a certain point where I start making money. But when I start making more money than I need to take care of myself, one of the greatest joys in life is to give money to people who need it, to give to situations and stuff. And all of a sudden, I go from taking, say, money to learning how to accumulate, to learning how to accumulate and give. But that's, I think, kind of an image that on all of our giftedness, it's supposed to evolve into that. And then that's when we're functioning at our greatest purpose, when we have the ability to give and to create and really reflect our Creator.
And I really do love in the Bible where the verse is John 3:16, and it says, "For God so loved the world that he gave."
That's right.
And that HollyKem was talking about the love of Jesus earlier, and how love is what also propels us to continue to give and to provide. And I love how both of you talked about the journey. It's like, you don't jump from one place to the extreme. It takes small steps throughout the process to go from taker to giver, to go from starting off from, an addict to making sure that you now a hope dealer. It takes the small steps that we have throughout life. So what does spirituality, how does that play in emotional healing and coping mechanism? How do you feel that's helps us through our life challenges?
Yeah, I think spirituality is so fundamental. I mean, I find that we have a natural propensity to heal like we do physically. But when we have connection with God and when our spirit is connected, the healing process can be accelerated tremendously. And we all go through a grief process when we lose someone we love. But when we have a spiritual foundation, connection with God, that process can be accelerated. So I think that in general, that's the first thing. The other thing is that, I have a pretty simple view of spirituality in a sense that Jesus said to love God, to love neighbor, and to love self. That's the bottom line. So I say, well, anything that's going to help enhance those three relationships is good. Anything that'll destroy those three relationships is bad, unhealthy, evil. And so if I'm doing something to help me have a greater love, appreciation of myself, then that's going to impact my relationship with others and my ability to understand God. If I reconcile my relationships with others then it's going to impact how I feel about myself and how I see God. And the third is when I have spiritual encounters with the Lord and it has shifts paradigms, it'll affect how I treat others and how I treat myself. So that's how I look at it. I say, okay, spirituality is those three relationships, or the choices that you're making improving those three relationships, or are they hurting those three relationships? And if they are hurting, we got to make a shift. If they're improving, we bless it, keep it going, and let's see it impact those three.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. And sometimes that's what we have to be able to do, and be aware of our emotions to know whether or not we are moving in the right direction and how that's going along in our lives. HollyKem, I didn't know if you had anything to say towards that.
Well, for me, God does all the healing. I just get to be a vessel. So life is very scary when you don't have that spiritual connection, because you just have the reality of what's in front of you. And it's real easy to move into fear, where when you have that personal relationship with God, spirituality is to bring us to, a personal relationship with God. And that personal relationship is what I get to take home with me, right? That it's one thing to be sitting on the pew and, you being fed like a baby, right? And you're writing your notes and, and you have community. But when you're home, when you're in the car, when you're at work, how do you, when planes are falling, you know what I'm saying? When all of this stuff is happening, that's scary. Where am I going to get the healing for my heart? Where am I going to get the healing? So it's like, it's not, as a human being, we don't have fear. It's that spiritual connection that heals all of that, because if it's just what I see, then,
Right.
It's we all get wounded in the spirit realm. You know what I'm saying? Like, we get erroneous teachings, different things happen, and we start to not trust God, right? But it's in that journey of getting that back. And what is God saying to me, knowing that he is the real healer? No matter which one of us gets to hold your hand through the process, or whichever system he gave each one of us to hold someone's hand to help them, but it's to help them get to that connection.
Yes. And, it's important to definitely have that relationship and that relationship with God, which leads me to, I know you both talk about relationships and relationships with whether it's spousal, other people in this world. How do you help those that are out there that are having difficulties in just connecting in relationships? What are some key tips that they can start to think about? And I'm thinking about marriage at this moment, because a lot of people are going into marriage thinking, it's 50-50. And I don't quite believe in that, but I want to know what your take is on that.
Yeah. You want to go?
Yeah, we can talk about this all day. This is our specialty.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of connection, I would say a couple things. I think that the original church was God walking in the cool of the afternoon with Adam and Eve. And so there was a harmony between those relationships with each other and with God. And the first fight in the Bible occurred when that harmony with God was broken. So in general, yeah, she did it. No, he did it. No. So there is an element to where, the ultimate ability to connect with your spouse has a lot to do with each person's ability to connect with God. And so I see that as the first church. The second thing is, because we're human, we're going to hurt each other. And when we hurt each other, it creates disconnection. And it's uncanny how I could be married to my wife for 33 years. She has access to all my bank accounts. I sleep in the same bed. We get naked in front of each other. And in 1.5 seconds, I see her as my enemy. I'm like, how does that happen? So there's this phenomena of disconnection that occurs at times in relationship. And often it's around a certain problem. And what I challenge couples, I say, when there's disconnection, don't try to solve the problem, because you're going to do it from a defensive posture and it's never going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing you need to do is reestablish connection. And after that's established, then you can talk about the problem. So if HollyKem and I have an issue, right, and I start talking about the problem, then she's going to prove why I was wrong, and I'm going to prove why she is wrong, and we're in this defensive posture, and we're not going to be able to solve the problem. But if we're disconnected, and she's a big on like acts of service. So if I pull out the vacuum and just start vacuuming the den as an act of love, oh, my husband's awesome, and wash the dishes or something, then we establish connection. Then we can talk about the problem, right? So,
Yes.
So I always say, no, before you try to start talking about the problem or resolve it, what do you have to do to reestablish connection? That's all she has to do is give me some kind of affirmation. She has to say, you're the most wonderful husband in the world, and I appreciate how hard you work, and I love how you parent our son, and I do this. You do? Oh, I love you. Okay, what are we talking about?
Now we can talk.
Well, I'm ready. And whatever you say, I'm fine. Yeah, I was wrong. I'm sorry.
Oh, I love that. Establish a connection first before trying to resolve and just going in. And really, in those cases, most of the time, we're probably both not listening and trying to get, to the next thing that we're moving forward with. Oh, man, that's probably worth all of our conversation already, that anybody who's in a relationship, you got to establish that connection. Go vacuum. That's what I got. Is that my husband vacuuming?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Right. And for women, a lot of times men, it's words of affirmation that really hit their heart. And, because when you're on a baseball team, a football team, you're a little boy, they're constantly criticizing you to become better, right? They push you through that way. So you don't always get the accolade unless you're the one with, that made the touchdown. But you've been on the team the whole time, and he couldn't have made that touchdown if I didn't block that thing. But nobody said you did a great job. So for men, even like a lot of times, well, that's what they're, women say, that's what they're supposed to be doing. No, they cannot do it. Okay. They cannot work that hard, and they can make $30,000 a year instead of $100,000. Your life would be very different. So you want to honor what they do. And even though it's what you're supposed to do. No. So when you I always say send a text or a voicemail when you know your husband cannot answer the phone, or when he's unavailable to get that text right away. Send it, and so he can read it and be like, wow, that what you really appreciate about him, what you see that he does, how hard he works, and how it makes y'all's life different. And I always, with our son, I always had him call Dean, call Daddy, and tell him thank you for working so hard for our family. At 2 years old, just constantly honoring him and getting him to understand your life would be different if Daddy didn't work the way he works and didn't care about us in this way. This is a way he loves us. And, that's women and children need to do that for their fathers and their husbands.
I think that is awesome advice, because yes, I do love to hear, hey, you've done a good job, and
That's right.
or you're doing something well, and I think that will help any relationship that's out there. And sometimes we can be at our throats, especially if you've been married for even a little bit, but married for a while. Like how could this happen?
Mm-hmm.
And being able to connect, and also making sure that we see the love and the beauty that our spouses provide and give to us, I think is just paramount and helpful.
It is.
So as both of you think about happiness and joy, how do you define that, and how can we achieve that in our lives?
I'll go.
Yeah.
Well, I
got great questions.
No, we love questions. It's so much better. Well, I had to learn the difference between what happiness was and what joy was. So joy comes from the Lord, and that's my strength. So as what I've realized is, as I grieve these losses that have happened to me in my life, that's how deep the joy goes. So my grief is directly connected to my joy. So as I grieve things, I feel the joy because I'm really trusting God with my emotional life, right? So I'm grieving these things. So if I feel the depths of the pain, within a very short period of time, I will feel the joy of life. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like the gratitude list. As I grieve, the gratitude, the joy is bursting. What I had to learn about happiness, a lot of people, they want to be happy, right? What I had to learn about happiness is it's a feeling. What happens when what I'm doing is whatever I'm doing and what's happening in the moment, I become happy about. So like, I'm always the happiest person in the post office. And the postmaster always says, "What? You were so happy." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm happy because I'm happy that I'm here." I don't like to run errands. So it's like, I'm so excited that I'm here. So it's like dealing with what's happening in front of me makes us happy. So when I don't deal with it, then I'm not happy. It's not the result. It's me doing the thing that needs to happen, right? So happiness becomes with my behavior. So, if I need to clean the kitchen, I'm not happy about cleaning the kitchen. But as I'm cleaning the kitchen, I become happy because I'm doing something and that brings the happiness to me. It's different than joy.
Yes.
They're both very, very important. You get a little kid, tell him he's got to clean his room and pick up his toys. He is not happy. But as he starts to do it, he's like, "Picking up my toys, I'm picking up my toys." And he starts singing, right? And he's like, "Look, Mommy, I'm picking up my toys." And he's happy. You see?
Yes. Yes.
That's good.
Very, very good.
Yeah. It was a big lesson for me.
I like that.
You like that?
Well, yeah. Thanks for sharing that. We, of course, always run into this part where it's just not enough time. I'm going to ask one last question, and hopefully both of you can provide. What are the one or two things that you would leave with someone that can change and transform their lives today that they can start doing that that will help them move into a better place in their life?
That's a good question. You looking at me? Okay. First thing I would want to say is that you need to write and look in the mirror and say, "I am worthy." I would write it every day. "I am worthy," and look in the mirror and say to yourself, "I am worthy." The next one I would do is write, "I am lovable." And then look in the mirror and say, "I love you," 10 times a day. And what starts to happen for that is you will start to weep. And as you weep is because there's a part of you that doesn't believe it. But that part of you needs to hear it is true, that you are worthy and you are lovable and that you do love yourself. And those small things are very, very big. And until you stop crying and you can do it, you don't stop doing it.
That's beautiful. I would say practice two very simple principles. Be committed that Jesus taught about relationships, repentance and forgiveness. And I define repentance as to have a heartfelt sorrow for the things that I've done to you, to others that have hurt them, to take full responsibility for it, and to verbalize it if it's appropriate, to apologize and make a commitment to do it differently. So if I hurt my wife through the isolating and not talking, I need to eventually say, "Look, I'm sorry that I withdraw and don't talk and how that's hurt you. I'm sorry. I'm going to work on doing it differently." So that's number one. Practice a lifestyle of repentance, of taking responsibility for your behavior. The second thing is practice forgiveness. And forgiveness is recognizing that I've been hurt by life, by people, by situations, by all kinds of things. And I'm willing to lay down the hurt in my heart on the altar and asking God to remove it. Now, Jesus was very clear. You practice these two principles. He said, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." Heaven's around us. And when you practice this principle, it ushers heaven into the situation. But the opposite is true too. Practice unrepentance, never apologize, and never forgive. And I promise the other team will be ushered into the situation. You want a lot of hell in your relationship and your life? Never apologize and never forgive, right? So So I say, commit yourself to practice these two principles, and life will be transformed, and heaven will be constantly ushered into your situations and your interactions.
Mm-hmm.
I want heaven ushered into what I do, so I will be looking at those principles. I really do thank both of you for taking the time and coming on the Produce on Purpose podcast. Can you share with my audience how they can get in contact with you and anything that you have to offer to them?
Yeah, we'd love to connect with you. Our website is ihaveavoice.com. And on that, we have, you can get to our YouTube channel. We have really, literally hundreds of free videos. We have our book, A Roadmap to the Soul, which you can purchase. Or third, if you're really ambitious and you want to do some intensive work, we have a program called Transform You, which is a 4-month online coaching program for individuals and couples. And it's really powerful. So any of those things, you can find those at ihaveavoice.com.
Mm-hmm. And get our book, A Roadmap to the Soul.
Well, HollyKem, Dean, thank you. And I have taken some great information from our conversation today, really understanding how we can navigate this journey of life, what we should do in our relationships, and really being focused on that forgiveness piece and repentance in our lives, and taking those on in our lives to make sure that we can have the releases and we can usher in the heaven that we want. And understanding that, sometimes the most difficult times that we have in life can become those treasures of our lives that we may have and that we can be able to provide. So being who we are, understanding our purpose, being real in our lives will all allow for us to focus and, most of all, produce on purpose.